Good afternoon and welcome to this Licensing Act 2003-10 hearing for Maud Nightclub. Present are councillors Anne Kelly, Karen Ingham, Lorraine Mahana and Councillor Ivory Moore acting as the fourth member who won't take any part in the meeting unless one of our other members loses their internet connection. Officers of the Council, Catherine Warby, Head of Legal and Democracy, John Clucas, Licensing and Compliance Officer, Eric Dickinson and Alison McEwen, Democracy Officers, Mark Hindman, Graphic Designer. Hearing parties, Rebecca McCoyd, Premises Licence Holder at Maud Nightclub, PC Michael Jones from Lancashire Police, and Jill Wolfendale, Environmental Health Officer from Burnley Borough Council. Thank you, Eric, if you'd like to make a start on the agenda.
Thank you, Alison. The first item on the agenda is appointment of chair. Do we have any nominations for appointment of chair, please?
I nominate Councillor Kelly.
Is that seconded?
I second that.
Are there any other nominations?
No.
All those in favour of Councillor Kelly as chair, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Councillor Kelly, you are appointed as chair for the meeting.
Thank you. I'm guessing with no apologies.
None, Chair.
Minutes of the last meeting. Are we happy to approve those as a correct record from the 8th of October? Members?
Yep, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. No additional items of business?
None, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? Exclusion of the public?
As per agenda, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to the determination of objections to the temporary event notice for Maud 77 Hamilton Street? Before we start going through, I'll just run through the procedure for everybody. First of all, can I just ask the licensing officer to confirm that all interested parties have been notified of the hearing?
Yes, they have, Councillor, and are present.
Thank you. And are there any interested parties not present?
None to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. I'll just quickly run through the procedure. First of all, the licensing officer will present the report, at which stage, if the applicant has any questions or clarifications, they can ask them at that point, same for members. Then the police will give their report, same again, the applicant will be able to ask for clarification, same for members. Then Environmental Health will present their representation, same again, and then the applicant will present her representations. There's the same opportunity for the applicant, everybody to present their cases. When all the questioning is finished, each party in the same order will have the opportunity to sum up their case. At this point, you can't introduce any new evidence or new issues. It's purely a summary of what's been said. At the end of the summing up, the committee will retire into a private session to make the decisions. Are there any questions about that before the hearing starts? Everybody happy with that? Okay.
Chair, can I just draw members' attention to the late correspondence that was sent out yesterday? It was late correspondence from the police outlining some incidents that had happened recently. I just wanted to raise the issue that there was a public version of the note that was redacted, and there was a private note that had no redactions that members have had by email and on Modern Gov. So I just wanted to raise the issue that there is a redacted version and an unredacted version. And just wondered whether there's any advice that Catherine might want to give on the information that's currently redacted.
Well, just that members should be mindful if once that evidence is presented by the police, just be mindful of the questions that you can ask, because obviously this information is not in the public domain at the moment, and so there is the potential perhaps to disclose information which could undermine some police investigation. So I think just obviously take a steer from what the police say, and just be mindful of the questions that you might wish to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Can we move on then? Can I ask the licensing officer to present his report?
Thank you, councillors. Good afternoon to everybody. I've sent out a copy of my licensing report to all participants. Hopefully you should have that in front of you. I will go through the report now. So this is a licensing hearing for an application for a temporary events notice following the receipt of a notice of objections. So that's to consider a notice of objection received by the licensing authority in response to a temporary events notice given by the applicant on the 29th of October of this year in accordance with the Licensing Act. The premises is Maud Nightclub at 77 Hamilton Street, Burnley. Members have got to take consideration of the licensing objectives. They are listed. The options that I consider are available to the panel this afternoon is to allow the licensable activities to go ahead as stated in the application. You can attach conditions to the temporary events notice which must be drawn from the conditions already attached to the existing premises licence, or indeed you could in effect reject the application and issue a counter notice preventing the event taking place, and that's if you consider taking into account the licensing objectives, and you've got to give a decision and explanation under the Licensing Act. Unlike new or variations of premises licence application, there's no provision within the TEMS process to mediate out issues that are arising. And conditions can only be attached to a premises licence at the premises, and they can only be attached to the 10 if they're on the existing licence. So the licensing subcommittee this afternoon are responsible for determining these applications where objections are received. Just in terms of summary, Maud Nightclub is a premises licence issued by the council. That's a copy of that is Appendix A, and that contains all the current licensing conditions. That premises licence allows licensable activities until 6 AM, and the premises licence holder is the applicant, and she's held the DPS position and also the premises licence since in effect it was granted in 2014. Friday 29th of October, as I mentioned before, the applicant sent to Licence Authority 2 applications, one of which was a late temporary events notice in respect to an event on the 7th of November, and also was a standard temporary events notice in respect to an event to be held on the 14th of November. Now, as the police objected to both, the late 10th of the 7th of November was issued immediate with a counter notice. So that matter has been resolved, as when an objection is made to a late temporary events notice, then the event cannot go ahead under any circumstances. So the hearing this afternoon is just in relation to the standard temporary events application for event on Saturday/Sunday, 13th to 14th of November. And a copy of that application is with your papers, Appendix B. Basically, that application seeks to extend the licensable activity for the premises from 6 AM till 8 AM on Sunday, the 14th of November. So the premises is opening up the Saturday into the Sunday. Their existing licence allows activities to take place until 6, and the temporary events notice is seeking to extend those activities until 8 AM. So that's what you're considering this afternoon. Under the Licensing Act, the 10 must be provided to the police and environmental health, and they are, under the legislation, the only parties that are permitted to object. And on Tuesday, the 2nd of November, the Licence Authority received objections from both the Lancashire Constabulary, and they're in your papers at Appendix C, and also Environmental Health Department, and they're in your papers Appendix D. The licensable activities that are applied for in the temporary events notice are the sale of by retail of alcohol till from 6 AM to 8 AM, and also the provision of regulated entertainment for the same hours. I'll just make reference to the application that received to us. Under the question, please describe the nature of the event. Below, the applicant has just put to extend the opening hours of the premises for a special event. Now, there are relevant background information, factual information that's all on public record in relation to the premises. So the premises licence for Maud was granted in 2014, although it was a different name at that time. In December 2017, the premises was subject to a review application that came before yourselves, and representations were made by Lancashire Police, Lancashire Trading Standards and the Public Health Authority. And at that hearing, it was agreed that the terminal hour for licensable activity would be revised from 8 AM to 6. So prior to that, the premises licence did allow activities till 8, but that was brought back till 6 o'clock. Under the December 2017 hearing, and also the conditions on the licence were replaced. Now, a copy of the summary of that is in your papers at Appendix E. Furthermore, in May 2021, a further licensing hearing took place before yourselves and colleagues after another review of the premises licence was triggered by Lancashire Police in respect to those premises. Further significant conditions were added to the premises licence, and a copy of that decision is attached in Appendix F of your papers. So the conditions that are on today's licence are in effect those that were added to the licence in May 2021 by yourself and your colleagues at a licensing hearing. I will now just refer to extracts from the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2005. Under 7.28, there's a paragraph there that you can read if you want to that talks about the procedure that you must go through. Under paragraph 7.33, they basically says if there's an objection, then that has to be given through to the licensing authority by the two responsible authorities. And 7.34, it says if those objections are there, then the hearing must take place in effect. 7.35, this is, I'll read this out in detail because this is more pertinent to this case. Such cases might arise because of concerns about the scale, location, timing of the event, or concerns about public nuisance, even when the statutory limits on numbers are being observed. The premises user who signs the form is legally responsible for ensuring that the numbers present do not exceed the permitted limit at any one time. In cases where there is reason to doubt the numbers will remain within the permitted time limit, the premises user would make clear what the nature of the event is and how they will ensure that the permitted persons limit will not be exceeded. For example, where notices are being given of attend simultaneously on adjacent plots of land, it may be appropriate for door staff to be employed with counters. In each case, it is important that the licensed authorities and the relevant persons can conduct whether they believe that the premises user intends to exceed the 499 person limit, or will be unable to control or know whether the limit will be exceeded. Where the planned activities are likely to breach the statutory limits or undermine the licensing objectives, it is likely to be appropriate for the police or the Environmental Health Authority to raise objections. There's an extract or one paragraph from the council's licensing policy that I'll draw you to attention to. That's under paragraph 17.4, and that says the police or environmental health may issue an objection notice because they believe that the event would undermine one or more of the 4 licensing objectives set out in the Act. The police or environmental health must issue an objection notice within 3 working days of being notified, but they could subsequently withdraw the notice. The issuing of such an objection notice requires the consideration of the objected by the council at a hearing in the case of a standard 10. If the objection relates to a late 10, then the tennis cancels or licensing or activities are not authorised. In terms of financial implication, budget provision, there's nothing that I need to bring your attention to. And I've referred already to the Council's licensing policy and also guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act. Statutory consultation has taken place, and there are background papers that are available should you require them. That's the police licensing policy and also the Council's own licensing policy. So that concludes my report to you this afternoon, councillors. If you anything that you think I need to clarify, I'll be happy to try and do that.
Thank you very much. Mrs. McLeod, have you anything you would like clarifying from that report?
No, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member, anything you wish to clarify from Mr. Clucas?
Councillor
No?
Kelly,
Okay.
Councillor Kelly, if I might just ask a question sort of on your behalf. I just wanted to ask Mr. Clucas whether the venue has a capacity limit.
Under the Licensing Act, it has not got a capacity limit, and there's nothing on the premises licence that does that, albeit there may be legislation under the remit of Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service that may impose that, but if there is, I'm not aware of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask PC Jones if he will present the police report?
Thank you very much, Chair. As I say, I'm PC 2623, Michael Jones. I'm a licensing officer covering the Burnley area. We are here today to object to a temporary event notice submitted by Rebecca McQuaid on behalf of Maud for extended hours to 0800 hours on the 14th of November 2021. As Mr. Clucas mentioned, Maud is a popular nightclub premises close to Burnley Town Centre, attracting significant numbers of customers. It is currently licensed until 0600 hours and the closing time of 0630 hours. It is one of two regular final destination venues in the town centre, meaning that customers generally go home when the premises close. I'm aware that some other premises in the town centre are licensed till 6 AM, but they don't tend to use those hours at the moment. I had considered whether to object to the applications, because objections to TENS are quite unusual, but I think it's justified under the crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. We have recently had a similar application from Ships and Giggles, another town centre venue, who also wanted to extend their hours, although their hours were only extended until 0600 hours. In my view, it would have been unfair to object to an application from Ships and Giggles, but to allow a similar application from Maud to go ahead without question. As we say, the issue with the Ships and Giggles applications and this one with Maud relates to extending the premises conditions into the temporary event notice. These are not automatically done and has to be done with agreement with the premises licence holder and agreed with by the committee today. Another of the issues that we have is, and it was the same with Ships and Giggles, as to how the number of customers would be reduced to 499 people, which includes the staff, at the time that the temporary event notice starts. Just for information, Ships and Giggles have temporary event notices on several weekends on the run up to Christmas till 6 AM. Following the first event at Ships and Giggles, from which was under their temporary event notice, I received an email from Rebecca McQuaid, basically blaming me for allowing the TENS to carry on. She wasn't aware that the police had objected to them, but she's now aware that the decision was made by the committee and not a police decision. Myself and Rebecca exchanged emails, and she's agreed to have the same conditions on the temporary event notice as per her licence, which is one of the issues that's easily sorted. And in fairness to Rebecca, she always believed that they just automatically carried on and would sort that out. I visited Rebecca at Mode in order for her to sign an agreement that she would have the same conditions as per the licence. And at that time, we discussed the situation. She told me that there was an unwritten rule in the town centre that premises close at specific times and that Mode was the final destination premises, and was annoyed that Ships and Giggles had gone against this by wanting to extend their hours. I agree that this is a good system that they have in the town centre, and it works in principle, but it's not enforceable and relies on the goodwill and trust of all operators. Rebecca told me that at that point that she intended to apply for temporary event notice until 8 AM, and at that time it was just for 2 occasions. As Mr. Lucas said, the first application was a late one and couldn't go ahead. We've got ourselves in a situation now where, since one premises is opening later, others want to follow suit, and we have a situation where 2 large venues are closing at 6 instead of just the one. Rebecca sent me an email earlier this week, and she's claimed that I said it was that she ran a perfect premises. My recollection of that was that I said her premises weren't the worst, but commented that she does quite a good job. We've had recent incidents involving underage people in clubs, and in all fairness to Rebecca, her premises are the only one that supply me with confiscated ID, so there are checks. If you look on the figures for incidents for the town centre of Burnley, the late night premises are all pretty much on a par, to be honest. There's none that are significantly worse than others, and due to the nature of the business, we will always get instances of disorder. As I said, we discussed the objection and what the police's concerns were, and one of the main concerns is how at 6 AM will the numbers be reduced to 499 people, which includes the staff. And again, in all fairness to Rebecca and Jason there, I was speaking to him, that's Rebecca's husband. They didn't have the paperwork to hand, but explained that the door staff conduct an hourly check to establish the capacity of the venue on an hourly basis, and this is something that's normally done and can continue to carry out. We had a discussion, and they were proposing that at 5 AM that they begin monitoring the numbers closely. I suggested that started a bit earlier than that, which would give an early indication of capacity and the ability to limit numbers by allowing only customers that have purchased ticket to enter the venue to restrict walk-ins. I discussed ticket sales, and this was for the previous event on the for the late temporary event notice for last weekend. And Jason mentioned that sometimes there's about 1,100 tickets sold, which then gave me concerns in relation to reducing the numbers to 499. From what I heard, I was quite confident that Rebecca would produce a plan of how they could monitor numbers, but whether they can reduce that numbers to 499 is a different matter. There have been some email exchanges between myself and Rebecca, and I believe she thinks this is a personal attack, not particularly on herself, but her business. And in all honesty, I want to try and give a fair and balanced view of the town centre. So I've made some reference to incidents over the weekend, which was in the late edition yesterday. These are issues, there are issues in there, but some of those are for discussion on another day, and I've explained this to Rebecca. Some of the logs that the police have had are unclear, and they need clarification, which this is a process following the review in 2020 that we have regular meetings to discuss what went wrong, if anything went wrong, and what lessons can be learned. I've included those incidents just to highlight that incidents are occurring up to a 2-hour period after the premises close. There There was an incident shortly after 7 a.m. at McDonald's 2 weeks ago involving disorder with 20 people from the nighttime economy causing issues and insisting on entering the restaurant. The restaurant had to press their emergency panic button and one person was arrested. Had these people been to Maud or were they from the Shits and Giggles because it was their first night of extra hours? I'm still awaiting CCTV to track the suspect back through the town to confirm where they came from, but what is clear, it was from the nighttime economy. Rebecca has questioned the link between her club and the disorder last weekend. The people involved in a domestic violence incident stated to officers that they had been in Maud. The male with the knife has refused to answer any questions in custody, but was clearly drunk. Rebecca questioned whether that male had, in an email to me, questioned whether that male could have gone home and got the knife. This male lived in Corn, and to believe that he had got to Corn, returned to Burnley to assault someone is very doubtful. I say, thankfully on this occasion, the knife was not used. Again, due to the time since the incident and this hearing, there's not been enough time to request CCTV to trace that male back to any particular premises. But my issue is it's not about particularly the type of incidents, it's the time frame where they're happening. Again, in another email from Rebecca, she quite rightly said to me that she can't be expected to follow everyone home to ensure they get home without issues. If the issues occur shortly after the close of business at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, the impact on Burnley Town Centre is less than it would be if the premises close at 8 a.m. And this is one reason that why we are objecting to the temporary event notice. As Mr. Clucas made reference to, Maud had been subject to a review, and reading the paperwork today, I think through agreement prior to the full hearing, Rebecca agreed to cut the hours back to 6 a.m. There was another premises in the town centre following a review that had their hours cut back from 24 hours back to a 6 a.m. finish. On Sunday morning, I started work at 5 a.m. Just to monitor the town centre due to the disorder at McDonald's the previous weekend, and that was just to get a view for myself of what town is like. At that time, Maud was the only premises open at the time. Ships and Giggles had closed at 5 a.m. On that morning, despite having a temporary event notice until 6 a.m. So I drove past Maud several times for about 20 to 30 minutes after the premises closed. It was very busy outside the club with taxis and customers milling about in the road. But traffic at that time was relatively quiet and caught quite well. But 2 hours later at 8 a.m, this could have a bigger impact. From the police's perspective, I see that we've got the three main issues here in this application for 10. One, will the 10 be subject to the same conditions? This is a matter that can be easily sorted, and Rebecca has agreed to have those conditions extended into the 10. Does the premises have a plan in place to control and regulate numbers to comply with the 10? As I say, from the early discussion I had with Rebecca, I'm presuming and hoping that she has got a plan together of how they will monitor those numbers. The third one is, I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here. Does the committee want to risk disordering the town centre following an 8 a.m. finish and potential for customers to continue drinking in other town centre venues, which I think the boot opens at 8 a.m. If more are allowed to open longer, will other venues apply to stay open longer and the situation snowballs? But again, if more are allowed to stay open until 8 a.m, will it create a gap in closing times to reduce the large-scale disorder at 6 a.m. when two large venues close? In an ideal world, we'd have a blanket closure time for all premises, but this is not possible, and each application is dealt with on an individual basis. We accept that there will always be an element of disorder and hijinks when premises close, but by restricting the later closure of premises gives time for customers to get home and out of town before the daytime economy starts. We're now in a position where Ships and Giggles will be open until 6 AM on several occasions up until Christmas. If Maude are unsuccessful in getting the 10s today and can only remain open until 6 AM, we will have more people leaving premises at the same time, potentially causing more disorder. If Maude are successful, will there be further applications to compete with Ships and Giggles, and will they be applying for further temporary event notice up until Christmas to compete with the Ships and Giggles, and again cause issues on the town centre up until 8 AM? As I said, I hope I've given a fair representation of our concerns, and if anyone's got any questions, I'm willing to answer them.
Thank you. Mrs. McCoy, have you any questions that you would like clarifying?
No, I don't, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any member or officer, any questions, any clarifications? Councillor Ingham.
Yeah, sorry, PC Jones, can you just clarify? So if Ships and Giggles are open till 6 and Maude close at 6 if the temporary events notice isn't granted, surely that's only going to be the same amount of people that would normally be released if both clubs were open till 6 o'clock anyway? Or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, Ships and Giggles has only got a licence till 4 AM normally, so that sort of creates a staged dispersal throughout the town centre. Now that Ships and Giggles have got an extension till 6 AM, they will be kicking. I mean, they didn't last weekend for some other reason. I presume it because it's quiet. They close at 5 o'clock. In the run up to Christmas, it may get busier, and if Maude closing at 6 and Ships and Giggles are closing at 6, then I say we've got two venues going out onto the streets at the same time. There is a slight distance between the clubs, but it's not a vast one. And as I say, that's where the concerns one of the concerns is raised.
Okay, so but the 4 till 6 extension on Ships and Giggles only allows them to have 499, including staff, doorman, and everything. And theirs is a ticketed event, I believe. So we're saying that Maude is also going to ask for this extension, and that 2 hours is going to be ticketed, apart from the tickets that they normally issue. Is that correct?
As I said, there was some concern. I think Ships and Giggles said their events were going to be ticketed. With whether that's happened, we do not know. In relation to Maude, and I think Rebecca may be better to answer that. I think they do. You can buy tickets online, reserve booths, and I think there also is a capability for walk-ins as well. But as I said, Rebecca may be able to answer more fully what her ticketing arrangements and entry arrangements are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, not knowing anything about the nightclubs in Burnley, are there just those two that finish at either 4 AM or 6 AM, or are there others in the vicinity?
As I said before, there are other venues that are have licenses till 6 AM, but as I said, there seems to be some sort of arrangement in the town where they close earlier and go. The only other premises that I am aware of is Harvey's, which is on Cow Lane. As I say, that they were subject to closures under COVID regulations, and they appear to have been. I'm not sure whether they're open fully again yet. When I drove past in the early hours after 5 AM on Sunday morning, it all appeared locked up, and there weren't any people loitering about there. But as I say, they have got a potential to open until 6 AM, and whether they do on the run up to Christmas, who knows? It's one of those things we don't know the answer to, in all honesty.
Thank you. Did you also say that the boot opens at 8 AM?
Yeah, if you look on Wetherspoon's website, they advertise it on a Sunday morning. They do open at 8 AM. As I say, I'm not generally about Burnley at 8 AM in the morning, to be honest, but it is what they advertise.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, did you want to ask a question?
I didn't, Chair, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, thank you. No more questions. Can I ask Environmental Health, Jill, to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Environmental Health obviously want to endorse what the police have said, and also we have our own objections to the late 10. I think the licence conditions, obviously, as we've mentioned, were reviewed and strengthened previously to further protect public safety, and I think extending those 2 hours again would sort of undermine that review and the conditions that were put there in terms of protecting customer safety, potentially obviously putting customers at a risk. In addition to that, obviously we have concerns about public nuisance, where people are going to be leaving the premises obviously earlier in the morning towards the 8 o'clock time. There are residential properties nearby, and obviously leaving at this time, people who are under the influence and obviously are going to be interacting possibly with other members of the public who may be in the town centre. Also, people may be waiting for public transport and things like that, and that has potential to cause public nuisance as well. So obviously, in terms of the residential accommodation in the town centre, it seems to be on the increase. There seems to be more residential properties in the town centre, and we're getting quite a lot of planning applications through for conversions for residential properties as well. So I have concerns really if we don't sort of discourage this additional hours of opening, that we're going to have further noise complaints and residents who are unhappy about the level of noise in the town centre. Obviously we do have complaints now from residents about town centre noise. So really that is the objections that we've got, and they are for public safety and public nuisance reasons. That's it, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. McCoy, have you any questions or clarification you'd like to ask of the Environmental Health team?
No, I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Any member want to ask any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Can we move on now to the applicant, to Mrs. McCoy? Would you like to make your representations, please?
Hello, yes. I placed a TENS notice. Sorry, I'm reading from a thing. We placed this TENS notice upon to our licensing officer and obviously to the council. And upon this, Mick has raised 2 concerns to me immediately. And these were that the TENS don't match my licensing conditions and how I would manage the capacity of the venue. So upon hearing these concerns, I immediately spoke in an email exchange, has already been discussed, regarding my plan to manage these concerns. We arranged a meeting in order, what I believed was to concrete and sign a document, putting these in place, which I did. I happily signed a document to agree to adhere to all my licensing conditions as part of the temporary event notice. As Mick has already said, I believe that would just follow on anyway. I wouldn't find any other reason to not adhere to the licensing conditions. We discussed about the management of capacity, and my plan of action for that would be to monitor throughout the night actually the capacity and the hourly logs that my door supervisors log. We can then restrict, if we need to, any further entries. We can do what is needed in order so that as it hits 6 AM, it will then be well within underneath the threshold that is needed to be a temporary event notice. I worry that the licensing authorities believe that I'm doing these temporary events notices in order as a gateway to permanently extend my licensing hours, and I just want to assure everybody that that isn't the case. I feel that by having a greater licensing hours, this will help to discourage any disorder that may happen on our front street. With the other temporary event notices in the town centre, one of my concerns is that people will leave the venue Ships and Giggles, as we've already discussed, at 6 AM. They will make their way to my venue because in a habit of people that are under the influence of alcohol, Maud is usually the latest place that people go, so they make their way up there, if you will, and then they will be refused entry if my temporary events notice isn't accepted, because obviously we will be closed at that point. And my concern is then that will lead to an abundance of people outside my premises and potentially have more crime and disorder as to whether it was allowed inside, and then they would be under the influence of our slow wind down, our dispersal policies that we have in place, and being able to be calmed down before they're sent home, where our door team then stand outside, disperse everyone into taxis and do the best that we can to get everyone through the streets. And I believe that me doing this through the festive period would actually reduce the crime and disorder rather than increase into it. I'm more than happy to work with the police, the council and the environmental health in any way to put in strict conditions that match my current licensing conditions. I run every single week with my current licensing conditions and we have very few concerns. We always pick them up with Mick, we always work on what we can improve at all times. I work very closely with Mick in order to make sure that we are running correctly, and I believe that we can still do that, and I believe that we can show that with the temporary events notice we can do this safely and it will actually be beneficial for the town centre. Over the festive period, we bring a lot of acts into the town, anywhere from the United States and other places, to bring people to Burnley, and I believe that giving them a better and safer night out is what I can do. And that's all I've really got to say.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, as the licensing officer, have you any questions or clarifications you'd like to ask of Rebecca?
Councillor, I don't think it's appropriate that I am given a right to question that, but yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. PT Jones, have you anything you would like to ask of Rebecca?
Yeah, we just wondered, have we got something in writing about the plans to reduce your numbers and monitor?
I can happily send that over to you. I thought that was the document that we'd signed last week, but I can set out an exact plan that we can get attached to the premises license, to the temporary event notice. That's not a problem.
No, I said the thing we signed last week was just you saying, yeah, you're happy to have your conditions in, which I say it's never been a problem with yourself. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you. Jill from Environmental Health, have you any questions or clarifications you'd like to ask of? Am I okay to call you Rebecca?
Yeah, of course, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Have you, Jill?
No,
have
I have no questions.
Environmental Health, anything?
No, I haven't got any questions, thanks.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Ingham.
Hello. Just a couple of questions, Rebecca. Your special event, could you tell me what that is?
Yes, so I don't know if you'll be aware of him. We've actually booked Fat Man Scoop to come to I have two premises in the town centre. I have Project.
Well done with him.
Yeah, I have Project in the town centre that actually closes at 4, and we've got a performance on there from me. He's from the United States, so we're basically flying him in to come and perform there. So our special event will be that we're hosting the after party there, so he'll then come over to Maud and do a meet and greet with all the customers. Anyone that's got a ticket will be able to get a picture with him, and that's how it'll work. So the performance will be at Project, and then he'll be at Maud in order to do a meet and greet with customers.
Okay, so if he finishes at Maud Project at 4, why can the special event not be held within your current licensing hours?
Just for by the time he's finished at 4, he has a bit of time to chill down, to calm down after the performance, and it's just to make it a bit more of a special event, to give that something extra to do the night that we've got there, that extended opening hours as well. And like I did discuss as well, I am just concerned about the other premises closing at 6 at the exact same time, and I'm just giving myself a little buffer of a couple of hours to not have a big chunk of people outside on the front street. It makes my dispersal a lot slower, and I think it would just make the whole situation a lot calmer.
And this will be a special ticketed event, will it, for those last 2 hours?
Yeah, well, the capacity will be managed, so the ticket holders will most likely already be in. So say at 4:30, if we've already hit the capacity of 499 people, including staff and door staff, there would be no further walk-ins. If I've got to the point where I'm only at 200 people, I would then continue to allow people to walk in, to come in, but I'll be monitoring that every single hour to ensure that we stay well under the threshold of 499.
But sorry, I kind of hate to be hogging this.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
But say, just for saying's sake, say you have 800 people in at 4 a.m. How are you then going to start differentiating between who stays and who goes? And how will you manage that so that there's no disturbance outside?
So from 4 a.m, say my capacity log is say 800, it is quite unlikely, but it is a possibility. As people leave, then nobody else will be allowed to re-enter. If you understand, as part of a nightlife industry, you do get people flowing out and then new people flowing back in throughout the night. It's not sort of, you don't get a queue of people, they all come in and they all stay there. You do get the exits and the entries throughout the night. Your total amount of people that walk through your venue is probably a lot more than what you've got in at one time. So by checking the capacity logs, we can ensure that, okay, we need to get rid of 200 people, say, let them flow out, but we just don't let any more in.
So Ships and Giggles are going to kick out at 6.
Yeah.
And you've said that you're generally the venue that people would overflow. So obviously customers from Project would go to Mod. Because it's obviously just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And you've already actually said it yourself when you did your summing up of your event and your TENS license. You said the possibility of people flowing out of Ships and Giggles and then coming to Mod to try and gain access because you would technically still be open, and that could potentially cause public disorder. How would you manage that?
This was my massive concern. I know Mick mentioned the email that I sent to him, blaming him for approving these TENS notices. Obviously, I didn't know they were objected to. That is my massive concern, that they kick out, it comes to Mod, it's on the street, there's people that haven't even been in my premises that are causing disorder, and it will automatically get back to my premises. And I feel that by us being open and having the ability to let them in, they'll then become part of our dispersal policy. So we'll be able to control them. We have a very long dispersal policy. So take a standard Saturday, for example. We stop entries at 5:30. We close at 6. But within our licence, we have a dispersal policy that lasts us till 6:30. So we have the very bright lights on. We have the staff going around, but nobody's rushed out because we've got a half-hour policy, a half-hour time for the last person to have to leave the venue under my current licensing terms. So I get that by them then becoming part of our long dispersal policy. So for example, with the temporary event notice, it would be highly likely that, although yes, I'm open till 8 a.m, everything will finish at 7:30, and you'll get 30 minutes of a wind down process so that people can leave. They're a lot calmer. It's not all out in one go, and everyone can get in. The doorman assists people to get into taxis. We have links with lots of taxi firms, and it's just a lot slower, and they're more under our control rather than just coming from another venue, being plonked on our front street and us having to manage it anyway when they've not been under our control within inside the venue. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member want to ask any questions or want any clarification? No. Can I just say, our concerns seem to be around these 499. You know, say you've got, I don't know, 550 people in at 10 to 6. How do you decide who stays and who goes?
That we wouldn't allow that to happen, because we wouldn't have gone over 499 at 5 o'clock, because I'll be assessing it through the night. I wouldn't. wouldn't put that risk on and let a few more people in the hope that some leave. It'll be monitored throughout the night to ensure that we never get over that point, so that we don't run that risk. That's my agreement with the licensing officer, that we ensure that we monitor it throughout the night so that we never run that risk of it being 10 to 6. Oh my gosh, we've got 100 extra people in here, we need to get them out quickly, because that would just cause crime and disorder. I wouldn't expect that.
Obviously, because my other concern would be, you're talking about having some kind of performance. Presumably people will know that this performance is going to happen. So are they not going to all want to turn up there and come to it?
Yeah, but we are, to be fair to the Fat Man Scoop event that is this weekend, it is a ticketed event, so I have control over my ticketing platform. I have control over how many tickets can be sold. So even, I know Mick said we sell booths, I know that each booth I need to allow for 6 people to be within that booth. And then obviously the other standard tickets need to account for the capacity. So I'm more in control with it being a ticketed event than just on a standard weekend.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Ingham, do you want to ask another question?
Please, I'm sorry.
No, don't apologise.
So Batman's coming from Project.
He is.
So all the people that are in Project are going to be aware that there's an after party at your venue.
They will.
So how are you going to manage the possible flooding from Project to your venue and then potentially Ships and Giggles? But you can obviously see my concerns here.
I can. So sorry.
Although you say you have complete control over ticket sales and you will make sure that there's nobody in there, over your allowed numbers for your 10s, it's not just a concern of what's happening in your club, Rebecca, it's what's going to be happening outside of your club when people are refused entry because you've reached your capacity. And that is obviously where we come down to the public nuisance, the public safety, the crime and disorder, which are obviously the objections that were put forward by the police and environmental health. And as a committee, we have to take all that into account. So it's just kind of a concern that if Project are going to flood you and then Ships and Giggles potentially are going to flood you, that this is just going to lay chaos, and especially on Remembrance Sunday.
Yes, so I understand where you're coming from. The way I can appease your concerns regarding Project is that it's the same ticket. So it's one ticket for entry to both venues. You don't pay a ticket to go to Project and then pay a separate ticket to go to Maude. Because I'm the owner of both and I'm the licensee of both, it's one ticket that is entry. So that is how, and the capacity of Project is a lot less than Maude in general anyway. We do already manage this of a standard weekend where we do reach capacity, if you will, because although, as John said, we don't have a legal limit on capacity, we do have a limit on a standard weekend for our fire safety, and we also have a limit for how many door supervisors we have employed at the time. I'm trying to think of the word. Sort of states how many people you can have in. So I can't reach it over a certain limit because of how many door supervisors I have. So there's been many a time throughout the year, and especially when we first reopened after COVID, where I actually didn't have the staffing to allow all the people in beside the venue, and it also reached there's been times where we've reached the fire capacity levels prior for big events. But they have been managed safely. We haven't had the issues. The door team that we employ have a very good policy outside. We have links with the taxi ranks in order to get people home. The outside management we can do really well. I would just prefer for it to be a lot slower when I've got the influx of people from another venue coming. People coming from Project, I can easily manage. People coming from another venue on a normal weekend, I would have to put other things into place. What
is your capacity for the fire regs?
I've got 3 floors, so if I was to open every single floor, it's 1,575. It was just to open the bottom floor. If I was just to open the bottom floor, which is the usual, it's very rare that we open 3 floors. It's actually 650.
Okay, but obviously, if you would, and is that what you would normally have on a weekend? 650 on just a normal bog standard.
To be honest, my standard numbers coming through the door at the minute, full walk-ins, so everybody that walks in the venue is around 700. But looking at the capacity logs at the peak times, the most people that we get in currently is around 500 people. So I do feel that by checking it earlier and reducing the people coming in, we can well keep it under the 499, including staff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else got a question? Okay, can we move on then, please? We're going to ask each party in turn if they wish to sum up. Can I point out, though, that at this point you can't bring any more new evidence or new issues? Okay. Can I ask the licensing officer if he would like to sum up?
Yeah, I think the only thing I will say that is relevant in relation to this, and you've heard it before, that the impact of a decision on one premises then rolls into other decisions or other applications. So you've heard that from the police that you allowed extra hours to go to the Ships and Giggles, and then partially as a consequence of that, then we've got another application today from another premises. If you're then minded to grant today's application for a temporary events notice to conclude licensable activities at 8 AM, then there are other bars in Burnley that will look at that and see that as that is the green light for them to extend their opening hours. And my principal concern at the moment here in Burnley is to have some clear blue water between what you might call the nighttime economy and the daytime economy. And the fact that by mission creep or whatever, where individual decisions are made, then that has got a longer term consequence for the town. And it is mission creep. And my concern is that knowing the punters that I do, they will, once out on a night out, they will go home when the last premises is closed. So if you've got a premises that's open, then punters will migrate towards that from other bars. And the only way that you can effectively have a window where there is a gap between the nighttime economy and people going home, and then other people who are genuinely just trying to go to work, start their Saturday morning or their Sunday morning shift, and then they're running into drunkards or people under the influence that have been out, is to have a terminal hour which is nearer 2 AM or 4 AM rather than 6 AM or 8 AM or later. So that's the only observation I will make to councillors this afternoon.
Thank you. PC Jones, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, just very brief. It's just some observations. Obviously, because we've got Ships and Giggles now, that is fixed for the next few weeks as a 6 o'clock finish. There's nothing we can do to stop that. It is simply a question of do we want more disorder at 6 AM, or do we want it split between 6 and 8 AM? As I say, it does affect the town centre. We've proved that last weekend that up to 2 hours after Maud had closed, we were having calls related to incidents from people who had been in that venue, and it's one of them. If we have an 8 o'clock finish, do we want impact of the town centre to up to 10 AM on Sunday? That's it. I've got nothing else to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill from Environmental Health, do you want to sum up? Have you anything?
Just to reiterate, really, that obviously the hours were not back to 6 previously, just to protect public safety following a review. And I think obviously that'll undermine it again if it was increased. And also I agree with what John said in terms of there are more residential properties now in the town centre than there have been, and we are having an increased amount of people who are sensitive to noise in the town centre who live there. And I think extending to that 2 hours could potentially impact on public nuisance in the town centre, obviously as well, where people are actually out and about at 8 AM in the morning as well. And I think, as John said, we don't want to be disturbed by people leaving the club at that time. So that's really what I just wanted to reiterate, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you like to sum up?
I just wanted to raise one point. It's not new evidence, just that our licensing hours were not taken back by hearing, as Mick said. Mick did let you know that it was actually a voluntarily thing that we did. I do believe that I can responsibly do this till 8 o'clock. I do believe I've got the plans in place to make this work, and I do think this does give me the opportunity to prove myself that I can actually make it work. We can work together closely, we can have a good nighttime economy, and I do think it would be beneficial for the time. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. That takes us to the end of the representations. At this point, the committee will retire to discuss and make their decision. So can I ask that everyone else is taken out into the lobby, and you will be called back in when the decision's been made. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this licensing hearing on the 9th of November 2021. The committee have made their decision, and I'll now hand over to the Chair, Councillor Anne Kelly, to give that decision.
Thank you. Can I ask our legal officer, Catherine Wardby, to read out the decision?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. The temporary event notice has been determined with a view to promoting the 4 licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The committee carefully considered the report of the licensing officer, the representations made by Lancashire Constabulary, the representations made by Environmental Health, and the representations put forward by the applicant. The committee has had regard to the temporary event notice and the relevant representations received. It has also had regard to the Section 182 guidance issued by the government and has regard to its own statement of licensing policy. Having taken all of the above into consideration, the Council considers it's appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives to issue a counter notice in relation to the temporary event notice applied for by Rebecca McQuoid for the Mode nightclub at 77 Hamilton Street, Burnley, for the hours of 6 AM to 8 AM on the 14th of November 2021. The reasons for the decision are set out in relation to the 4 licensing objectives. Under the prevention of crime and disorder, the committee accepted that the police had provided details of incidents of alleged crimes that occurred on the 6th and 7th of November, which were connected with the Mode nightclub. They also accepted the concerns from the Environmental Health and the police that the temporary event notice will increase disorder in the town centre if the venue is allowed to open till 8 AM. In relation to the prevention of public nuisance, the committee accepted the opinion of Environmental Health that the event will generate additional noise complaints from residential properties close to the venue. The committee also accepted the opinion of the police that the granting of the temporary event notice would be likely to extend crime and disorder further into the morning. In relation to public safety, the committee accepted the evidence of the police over their concern that there was no suitable plan in place to control the numbers limited by a temporary event notice, and the committee was not satisfied by the assurance given by the applicant as no detailed plan was provided. And then lastly, in relation to the protection of children from harm, the committee noted that some of the incidents on the 6th and 7th of November were alleged to involve minors who should have not been in the nightclub in the first place. The matters set out in the paragraphs above have the effect of undermining all of the 4 licensing objectives. In those circumstances, it is considered that the issue of a counter notice serves to promote all 4 of the licensing objectives. Consideration has been given to all the powers available to the licensing authority under Section 105 of the Act, but concludes that the issue of a counter notice is both necessary and proportionate in the circumstances. That concludes the decision. The applicant does have the right of appeal against the issue of the counter notice. Such appeal must be made at least 5 working days before the date of the event. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that concludes the meeting. So can I just thank everybody for their attendance this afternoon? Thank you for your input. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.